Hello and welcome to the Southern Stars Coronavirus Podcast. I'm Siobhan Cronin, the news editor.
And I'm lifestyle editor Emma Connolly.
And each week we talk to people at the centre of the COVID-19 pandemic in West Cork and beyond. We'll also take a look at that week's Southern Star newspaper and how our reporters all around West Cork are covering the pandemic and some other stories too. This week we'll also have some new music from Kinsale-based singer-songwriter Klaus Harvey. And also in this week's podcast, I will be talking to two women about climate change, sustainability, and where the world is right now in its fight to save the planet. But first, let's take a look at this week's paper, Emma.
Yes, Siobhan. So it's a jam-packed edition. I mean, forget about silly season. There's so much happening in West Cork right now. It's insane. We could have filled 3 papers. But on page 1, we've got a good story, I think, that's going to concern a lot of parents and students from Kieran O'Malley. It's the upcoming concerns over school buses and social distancing this September. We've also got another great one about the traffic gridlock at West Cork's beaches last weekend. If you were stuck in the middle of that, you'll know all about it. And then, of course, we put the spotlight on our incredible local sea swimmer, Steve Redmond, and his amazing achievement. And actually, Siobhan, you also have got a really fascinating story about a famine letter, which literally has to be heard to be believed. I mean, it's got all the elements of a Hollywood movie. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a letter that has been uncovered in recent weeks by the Skibbereen Heritage Centre, and Terry Carney is the manager there, and she's done an awful lot of work into this. She was looking for material really to fill a exhibition that they wanted to put on to mark 20 years of the Heritage Centre, and of course it is the premier famine museum in the area as well, given that Skibbereen was so badly hit. So she came across this letter, which was written in 1846, and it was written by a magistrate in Cork City who had heard that the famine was really causing quite an awful lot of devastation in this area, and he decided to come down and see for himself. So after having spent some time here, he was so horrified by what he saw, and we have the letter in full printed inside this week, and it really is horrific scenes of people tearing at his clothes, trying to get at him, a woman with a baby, you know, quite obviously in the last stages of life. Out of nowhere, 200 people came upon him, kind of came out of what he calls little hovels. This was down around Reen near Union Hall. So he wrote a letter to the Duke of Wellington with the intention of it being sent on to the Queen. And within weeks of that, a famine relief committee was set up, and the equivalent in today's money of about 43 million euro was sent to Ireland, and quite a lot of that was sent to Skibbereen because of this letter. Now, when they went to find the letter, they thought what they found was a copy, but actually they have had it verified since, and the handwriting and the smudges on it, and they believe it is one of the original letters that this man Cummings wrote. And he wrote it several times, the same letter, because of course in those days there was no such thing as carbon paper or photocopiers, and he sent it to a load of newspapers, one of them being the Times of London. And when that was published, it had caused quite a sensation really, that what was happening in Ireland. And in fairness, this is something that's not really written into our history books, but the people of Britain actually came out in their droves and helped when word spread about what was happening, and sent money to the Irish, you know. So even though the government has been criticised heavily, the plain people of England basically, you know, were horrified. And so that letter in itself is quite significant, but what's even more significant is that a man called Patrick Aloysius O'Hare brought it to America with him when he left Ireland and emigrated. And it was passed down through his family, and through marriage, he is related to Rita Hayworth, the famous...
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, she's the famous American Hollywood actress, really glamorous, beautiful-looking woman. She married the Aga Khan, which I actually hadn't realised. And so their daughter, Princess Yasmin, is alive now, and Terry managed to contact her and tell her about the letter, and she's really thrilled, and she's saying she'd love to come to Ireland sometime and see it in person. But the letter is going on display this week in the Heritage Centre, and it's a fascinating story. And also Rita Hayworth's uncle was a man called Vinton Hayworth, and he was in his own right very famous actor, and he was in I Dream of Jeannie, which I think older ones among us we remember in the 60s. And so it's got all the ingredients for a fantastic story.
Totally. And I mean, major kudos to Terry for bringing it all together and sticking with it. I mean, it could very well have never been uncovered. And to yourself, then, yeah, it's for putting it together in such an accessible way. No, I think that's one that readers are just going to like think, is this really true? Fascinating.
Absolutely. And I'm dying to get a look at the letter myself now when it goes on display, because it's a really unique piece of history, and it's been passed down through generations. So that's a fantastic story, really. So also, Emma, we also have inside a quirky little
The Young Offenders,
Yes.
It's very light-hearted, but it's like super cute. Turns out that there's a very strong West Cork link to the new series of The Young Offenders, which obviously is as Cork can be. So the third series returns to our screens this Friday night after the news, and turns out that Baby Star is played by none other. It's a shared role by Drimley twin sisters, Penny and Nola Richardson. So it was filmed last July when the girls were 8 months old, and they're 19 months now and still completely oblivious to their claim to fame. But I spoke to the mom, their mom Randa, and turns out that the girls completely stole the hearts of the boys and the entire crew and had them eating out of their hands. They used to like sing to them between takes and everything. So we've got a little taster of it in this week's paper, and then we've got the full interview and some great pictures in next week's Southern Star. So where their mum and dad are telling me about how they had to juggle, nappies and naps and feeds on the set, and basically whichever baby was kind of most settled was the one that was plonked into the scene, kind of thing, and driving up and down every day from Drimley and stuff. So it's a good one. I think readers will enjoy that one.
There's a gorgeous picture of them with Jock, who's played by Chris Wally. The dad as well. Yeah. So, and a story that kind of sends shivers through my spine is that the jellyfish are back in West Cork now.
Of course, because you're a sea swimmer, exactly.
Yeah, so that's where the old wetsuit comes in very handy, I have to say, and the gloves and the hat and the socks, because as much covering as you can get on you these days. But not too many sightings of the Portuguese man of war, although there have been ones in Kilbrittain and Longstrand. But there's quite a few other nasty little fellows in the water anyway, and even that compass, which is seemingly not that dangerous, can give you a nasty enough little sting. And if there's quite a few of them together in a group, you can be a bit sore. And we spoke about Steve Redmond. He's on the front page this week, and he swam the 40 kilometers to the Fastnet Rock and back, the first person ever to complete it over and back. And he did make reference to the jellyfish, and he said never mind the sharks, he had no bother with the sharks following him, but he said these guys can bite your tongue, bite your lips, bite your nose, and he had to take painkillers and go to bed when he got home because of the jelly sting bites. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of the other side of West Cork summer, I'm afraid. And also, Emma, kind of following on the theme of, I think we did something similar last week about the snug pubs in Macroom. This is called One for the Road, and it's a cute, really cute little mobile pub that these guys from Ahiol decided to put together when they had some time on their hands. And I love the quote from them. They said, "We got a 14-foot trailer that someone said they wouldn't put chickens in, and then we built a pub on top of it."
It's gas, and it's in high demand by all accounts, and I think readers will see from our picture. Yeah, it's very authentic. I mean, you will definitely get the real Irish pub experience in it.
Yeah, and you can rent it now. They weren't initially going to do it. They just put it on wheels so they could share it amongst the three of them in each other's houses. And then when word got out that it was available and it could move, they got a bit of demand. So now they've decided to hire it. So it's on Facebook, I think, if you want to book a weekend with your own pub. So another story there on page 4, which I thought was really interesting, Emma, was about the first woman to walk in space, and she is being interviewed this week, I think, by Pat Kenny on a podcast.
That's it.
Type of event. But she actually also has dived to the deepest area in the sea. So she's gone to the highest heights and the deepest depths. And of course, being such an intrepid explorer, she has West Cork, Kerry links. She's right on the border there. Her father's family are from Beara. So that's just a nice little quirky story there as well.
Yeah.
A fantastic American astronaut called Kathy Sullivan. And another story that's very close to my own heart, because I think it's probably my favourite location in all of Cork, which is Fort Mar in Crosshaven. And that was, you know, I think a fantastic community story there. The fort had fallen into disrepair and ruin. It was overgrown. It was weeds everywhere. And the locals just got together and decided, you know what, this is a great tourist attraction. We're going to get it back on track. They've put years of work into it. It opened there a few years ago, and they've had some great summers there. And if anyone does get the time to visit it, they've just announced they won't open till next year now because of social distancing and the fact they're a volunteer group and they don't have that many people available to police it. But I think it has the most spectacular view in Cork from the cafe. It is the whole of Cork Harbour from the city to Roach's Point.
It's stunning. I was at a wedding there a few years back. Yeah, and it was one of those magical days. It was just, it's a standout spot. It's a pity it's not going to open this season, as you say, given that it's so volunteer led. But look, hopefully, I think, as you say, everyone should put it on their must visit list for next year and support them. It's a little gem, all right.
Absolutely. And just one other story there I was involved in. I got an article from Dahi Fallon, who is originally from Roscommon, but he's living in Inishannon now. And he just spent some time researching this story about Sergeant Mulheron, who was an RIC officer during the War of Independence. And he was shot at the top of the steps outside Bandon Church this week in 1920. And it's just a very interesting piece. There was a bit of a turning point in itself in the war, because even Michael Collins came out and said, look, this is not, you know, this is not right. This man was going to church. He actually had his hand on the door about to go in. He was shot in the back. There was all sorts of theories about who had shot him. And it's just a really interesting piece, a kind of an unusual take maybe on the whole War of Independence. It's really worth it.
Yeah.
If you're interested in history. And
it brings great value. I mean, now that we're actually talking, I mean, the famine letter and this story alone, like, are really unique takes that, like, our readers wouldn't have heard about anywhere else. Like, so this
and I think
take on the Bandon murder is fascinating.
Yeah, and there has been a real grow for nostalgia I don't know what the connection, I'm sure psychologists would know what the connection between pandemics and lockdowns and nostalgia is, but as you know, we've all been talking about old TV series, looking at old books again, and history has had a massive resurgence, and there's been huge interest. We've seen ourselves, anytime we put anything on Facebook of a history nature, there's a huge take up. So I mean, this is well worth the read, I think, certainly in the year that's in it as well. And,
definitely.
Emma, you wanted to talk there about a story you'd done a few weeks ago, which was on the front page about the lack of broadband in Gagan, and there's been
Totally, yeah. Just very quickly, a few weeks back, we put the spotlight on a group of people living in Gagan who had to work out of Bandon Church car park, because basically their broadband at home wasn't good enough. So this week we're updating it. It turns out that Owen O'Sullivan of the Bandon Tuition Centre has very kindly come to their temporary rescue and has offered them a space in the centre, which is obviously empty because it's summertime, so they can avail of the facilities there until September at least, and they're completely grateful for that. But obviously enough, they're saying It's wonderful, but it's only temporary. Our situation hasn't changed, and they're pinning all hopes on the National Broadband Plan, which obviously has been stalled several times. And yeah, they just want to keep the spotlight on that. So while they're saying, brilliant, thank you very much, Owen and Bandon Tuition Centre, come September, they're going to find themselves in the very same situation. And actually, one of the chaps' daughter attends Mary I in Limerick, and she's been told already that she'll only be attending in Limerick for 1 out of the 4 weeks every month. So she'll be at home in Gagan for 3 weeks. And yeah, her dad was saying to me, look, that as a family, they're really concerned as to what's going to happen. So that's just a little update on that. Their situation hasn't really changed. We also are telling our readers about our new Southern Star directory, which we're very excited about this week. It's a new online business and tourism directory for West Cork, and it's part of our ongoing Support West Cork Top Local campaign. So it's been live for over 2 weeks now, and already we have 75 local businesses listed on it. Kind of the idea behind it is that it would be a tool that would be useful for both tourists and locals, and it would be, something that would be just as useful now as it would be in the coming years. So just letting people know about it and have a look at it in terms of interest, information, and of course any businesses that would like to be featured on it, please contact us by email or give our office a ring in Skibbereen. We'd be happy to chat about that. So that's on our business page.
Yeah.
Yes, property. Oh my God.
Beautiful house in Ballydehob, is it?
Ballydehob. Yes, it's in Ballydehob. But actually, things were, the property scene was obviously a little quiet once the pandemic hit. But oh my goodness, it's taken the West Cork scene has taken a major a nosedive up. It is so busy, estate agents are saying at the moment, which is fantastic. And I guess all it's kind of pointing towards people who have been, re-examining their lives and their lifestyle since the pandemic hit. And of course, lots of people are thinking that, West Cork would be a fantastic place to relocate. So as a result, everyone's really busy. So one such property which might pique the interest of anyone looking to live the West Cork dream, it's on the market with Charles McCarthy in Skibbereen, and Maeve McCarthy was telling me about it. Basically, she said it's a really unique property. Certainly looks at it's a restored farmhouse on 6 acres, kind of woodland, gorgeous river bounding it. The owners done most of the restoration work themselves, and craftsmanship is beautiful. So, looking at the images and the drone photography, it's the kind of place where you think you could definitely live happily ever after. I'd like to live there, I think. But there's and it's beautiful. And then next week, actually, we've got another gem out Durrus direction with a swimming pool. So there's plenty of properties on the way.
They're all a little bit more attainable than the 5.5 million island off Ballydehob.
Oh, yeah. I know. We still don't know who's actually snapping that one up, but that's, yeah, exactly.
Our eyes are all peeled around here anyway. And there is also an interesting story on the farming this week about carbon neutral farming. Exactly.
It's very interesting. In fact, it's great proof how innovative our local company Carberry is. So basically it's a world first, in fact, what they're trying to achieve. And as you said, they're working towards creating a net zero emissions dairy farm locally. Now it's part of a Science Foundation Farm Zero competition. And there's a whole range of experts involved with Carberry, Chagas and other advisors and all the rest. It's a long-term project, obviously. It's not going to happen overnight. So this is one story we're going to be revisiting time and time again. But if everything goes to plan, and hopefully it will, this is going to be a real game changer. So it's very, very exciting.
It's very appropriate this week as we're talking about climate change, just after this on the podcast as well. But just tell me a little bit about the story on the front of Community this week, because when I was reading it, I told you I found it quite emotional and beautifully written, but there's a really kind of poignant backstory to it, isn't there? The Bob Oak project.
Yeah, yes, there is. And I mean, as you said, look, we had a little chat earlier. Like, it is kind of somber reading and it's sad, but that's just a reflection of life sometimes. Basically, it's I'm telling people about the Bobo project, which is this really incredible project being spearheaded by a lady living in Port McSherry, a lady called Laura Whalen. So she's a doll maker. Started off making dolls for her own children, then dolls for her friends and stuff like that. And she was making a doll for somebody some years back, and this person told her how her brother died when he was just a couple of weeks old in a mother and baby home, and it really, like, Laura's a mum of 5 herself, really touched her and found it very moving. And then kind of what came from that then was she was thinking, look, all the babies that passed away in the mum and babies homes around the country really deserve to be remembered in some form. And she thought, why not a little doll that fits in the palm of your hand, just to give them that dignity. And she started the ball rolling in Port McSherry, started it locally, but now people all over the world are involved, literally sending little craft handmade dolls to her in the local community shop where she collects them. So she, after a little bit of research, decided that 6,000 would be the approximate number, and they're halfway there. They've made 3,000 dolls. And a documentary crew are literally following her around, and they're making a documentary. And like the ultimate plan is that they would travel around the country, obviously when things allow, to put on an exhibition of the dolls, chat to people who may have been touched by this, and yeah, the documentary will air at some point in the future. So like what she's doing is very selfless. It's like touching lots of people, like I said, from Alaska, Australia, Europe, all over Ireland, and people are helping out.
Great. Yes, it's a very worthy project. And also, of course, not forgetting, I don't know what week we're on now, but we're still on your diary of demented home worker, and you're talking about masks and that stair again. What do you call that stair? Blue steel.
Oh, my blue steel, exactly. Well, I think I'm on week 20, but I'm open to correction on that at this stage. But yeah, what I'm talking about the masks exactly. So I mean, the column really is just a bit of fun. It's whatever comes into my crazy mind, and whatever I happen to hear. Like, actually, I think people are getting a bit careful about what they say to me now, because they don't want it, they're afraid they're going to end up in the column, whereas I'm just trying to get people to tell me things. But so I am chatting. I did mention.
Didn't somebody stop you recently and give you a bar of chocolate at a supermarket? And
yes,
other people have comments and sent you notes.
Well, do you know what? Without sounding like I'm very precious about myself or anything. Like I've worked in newspapers for about 20 years, and I have to say, this is the most engagement I've ever had with any of the readers on anything. So, and I'm loving it. It's great. I got a free bar of chocolate from someone. That wasn't for the column. That was just in a gesture of kindness. But I got a lovely letter from somebody in Durrus telling me how much she's enjoying it, and asking me, by the way, was my mum O'Neill from Bandon, and if she was, tell her I said hello or whatever. And my mum is O'Neill from Bandon, so I have to write back to you, Caroline, if you're listening. You were on the ball there. So it's gas. So like I'm loving the interaction, and I keep it coming. But yeah, so this week talking just about masks again. I know I've been banging the drum for a while, but like Siobhan, I know you feel the same. Like, people just need to wear them, and wear them properly, please. And it's no big hardship, really. It isn't. What else was I talking about? Oh yeah, reversing around. Yeah, I'm a brutal reverser, a brutal parker, brutal everything to do with cars, really. But I am just trying to hold my nerve driving the busy West Cork roads these days, because you're going to meet so much traffic, and having to reverse around the corners and all the rest. So that's just a bit of fun. And we just had a little bit of a mention of poor Eamon Ryan, who nodded off in the doll. But sure, look, I said it could happen to the best of us.
Absolutely, yeah. And I even noticed when the column went online this week from last week, and you had said that someone had stolen your place on the beach, somebody piped up and said, I think it was me, Emma. So it just shows you be very careful in West Cork what you say, because somebody somewhere will know the reference that you're making.
I think I might have been. I think I'm not very popular. I think I might have to change my beach, actually. So I have to think twice when I'm writing again.
Well, I think you should keep it up as long as you can, because I think it's something that people obviously need. No more than nostalgia, they also want a good laugh at the moment. So I think it's definitely worth doing. So listen, Emma, thank you so much for that, and thanks for joining us this week. And don't forget, if you can't get to the shops and you don't like reversing around corners on dodgy West Cork roads, you can subscribe online by going to southernstar.ie and clicking on the e-paper tab at the top, or call the office on 028 212 00 for a postal copy to be sent out to you. This week's interview during Plastic Free July is with two very impressive West Cork women. Kinsale-based Dr. Tara Shine is a sustainability expert, activist, author, speaker, and so much more. She has 20 years' experience of international and national policy making and has worked with the Mary Robinson Foundation Climate Justice, the OECD, the World Bank, the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs, and the Environmental Protection Agency, to name just a few. Tara worked as a climate negotiator at the UN for 10 years and has just authored a book, How to Save Your Planet, one object at a time. Alicia Joy O'Sullivan from Skibbereen is a climate change activist and one of this year's Leaving Cert students. She campaigns on a wide range of issues, including young people's mental health, LGBT matters, the reform of sexual education, and of course, climate change. In 2019, she was named a Lions Club Youth Ambassador for Ireland, and last year spoke at the first UN Youth Climate Summit in New York. Just this week, she helped launch the Youth Manifesto on climate justice. I spoke to both of them earlier. Okay, welcome Tara and Alicia. And let me start with you, Tara. Before COVID-19 hit, climate action and sustainability were really pretty much at the top of everyone's agenda. And there was a very tangible sense, I felt, that the world was actually listening to what people had to say. But in recent months, it seems to have fallen down the agenda a bit because of what's happening in the world. So does that worry you?
Morning, Siobhan. Yes and no, it hasn't fallen down the agenda. Yes, we've had to focus on this one major risk and crisis facing the planet, in this case COVID-19. But that has also focused our minds on our ability to cope with disasters when they happen. And we've seen how powerful it is when government sets strong, regulations and targets and tells us what we need to do, and when that's accompanied by individual action, what we're capable of doing. And that's exactly what we need to do for climate action. So that gives me hope. And the other thing that gives me hope is the way that countries around the world are looking at the kind of the recovery funding that they're pumping into the COVID recovery now, and how to make that green, and making sure that there are green strings attached to that, so that we spend those trillions of euros in a way that is going to deliver results for the long term, so that for Alicia and her generation, they'll reap the benefits of this investment that we make now in terms of a sustainable recovery, not in terms of having locked them into further carbon intensive type of infrastructure industry into the future. So I don't think it's gone. I think it's more about how it finds its way in the new normal, and how, for me, we build back a better world. This is a great opportunity. When you press a restart button, it's an unprecedented opportunity to do things better than we did them in the past.
Okay, and speaking of a restart button, now we have a new government the last few weeks, and the Greens have a much bigger role than ever before, and with some big portfolios there. So have you got a lot of hope from that, what you've seen happening in this country?
Well, number one, I have great belief in collaborative leadership and shared leadership. So I think this is a good development for Ireland. I think all of the parties are now going to have to hold themselves and each other to account, and they're going to have to be much more creative in the way they make policy and law than they have in the past, because they're going to have to do it in a collective sense. I think having the Greens at the table is really important. I think now they have the capacity to shape policies that are going to be sustainable, but also just and equitable and inclusive. And that's exactly what we need. We need to start creating green policies that aren't just about being green, but that are about making a better quality of life for everybody. And that means they spill way out past the environmental SDGs or sustainable development goals. It's about our economics, it's about our social structures. And when we start to look at it in that broader sense, I think it's also more appealing for everybody, every single citizen.
Right. And now you're both based here in West Cork, and sometimes you get the impression there's a greater focus on sustainability and climate action in this part of the world, because we have a very diverse body of people living here, and quite a lot of people from other areas and people coming to us with new ideas and that. Does that make the life of a climate activist easier, being surrounded by a much more conducive environment, we'll say? So I'll ask you first.
Yeah. So I do think we're blessed to live in West Cork for all kinds of reasons, you know, for the natural environment, for the diversity of people that live here. But I think you will find now increasingly in every part of Irish society, in every part of the country, more and more pockets of people who are really interested in finding a different way of living that's better for them, for their health, for their well-being, for their quality of life, and as a result for the planet. But what I want to do is I think we need to grow all of these communities. So some of us self-identify as being green or something climate aware or whatever, but I want to take this conversation and really democratize it and make it so that everybody feels they can be part of this conversation about shaping a better Ireland. They don't have to be green, they can be purple, orange, blue, it doesn't matter. This is a conversation for everybody because it's not about doing things just for the planet, it's about making a better society for us as Irish citizens. And that's in everybody's interest.
Absolutely. And if I could just turn to you there, Alicia, this week in particular now, you were involved in a very exciting event. It was the launch of the Youth Climate Justice Manifesto. I know Mary Robinson was involved in that as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what exactly that means?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Siobhan. So essentially last year, the National Youth Council of Ireland and Concern held this big event in the RDS in Dublin with 400 young people from all across Ireland, some quite young, some in their older teen years. And they basically discussed the idea of SDG 13, climate action, all about climate justice, social justice, and like Tara was saying about how it's creating a better life and world for everyone. It's not just about being green or saving the turtles or something. It's about making life actually better. And that's a vision, and it's a vision that some people find easier to see than others. And that depends on a lot of different factors in your life. So essentially what happened from that event was they passed it on to ourselves, the National Youth Council of Ireland's Young People's Committee. It's definitely not
a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, absolutely. And we worked on that at the beginning of 2020 and then still during lockdown, virtually online. And we came up with the 4 points that we called for unity, we called for just transition, we called for green check, and we called for a social justice lens on climate action. And that's essentially what we launched yesterday. Mary Robinson was our first signature on our pledge. So we're hoping that as many people will sign on to that as possible.
And what are some of the things in the manifesto? Are there a few pointers you can tell us about that you're aiming?
Yeah, so those are the 4 points. So essentially, to break them down, we call for unity means that essentially we're not blaming one sector or we're not blaming one group of individuals. Like I know in Ireland, it's controversial between, you know, environmentalists and the agriculture sector, and we don't want that anymore. It needs to stop because it's divisive and it's not getting us anywhere, and it's not fair because we're trying to transition. We're in this huge transitional period, especially now with COVID-19, like Tara mentioned. It's like a restart button, and if we're going to go back to that finger pointing stage, you know, we've even seen it with COVID. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't help the situation at all. And then for the green check, it's about developing policies that aren't detrimental to the environment, and that I suppose, you know, we directly look at how it actually can help the environment, or, you know, that it's not having a negative effect if we implement something. And then for the just transition, again, ensuring that we leave no one behind when we do this, and that everyone is supported adequately. And for the social justice lens, again, so that people are helped and supported, and that it's not just about the turtles or plastic wash up, which are all of course important aspects of this. It's about everything, but people are at the center of it, and that's where our focus was with the manifesto.
And I spoke to you last year, earlier this year now, and before the general election, and you were very active in getting your peer group registered and getting them out to vote. And do you think young people were happy overall with the outcome, or how did you feel about the government we have now?
Well, look, we have good democracy in this country, and at the end of the day, numbers are numbers. And look, maybe preferably people who got in, who I wouldn't have wanted to get in, got in. But at the end of the day, I think at that moment in time, we needed a government, and that was pretty obvious to most people who had a head on their shoulders. And we were kind of, we had the caretaker government, but people needed real strong leadership, and they needed to see someone at the top. And it's obviously difficult when it's a caretaker government to see that as an accurate representation of what you voted on a couple of weeks ago, especially in such a high tense situation, which was COVID-19 at the beginning. So, and I think young people, they voted for change. They certainly came out in Cork Southwest and voted. I don't know if I had any help, but they certainly did. And it was interesting during the whole Leaving Cert certificate situation to see how many young people were getting engaged. I think more young people know who Joe McHugh is now than they ever did before. So it was interesting to see young people getting directly involved. Obviously, a negative situation, but it might spark something to continue to vote in the future.
And are you worried now that the question I posed to Tara there, that the focus has gone a little bit off climate change? Now, I know Tara says it hasn't, but maybe I'm just coming from a journalist point of view. It's not really on the front pages to the extent that it was. If you go back a few months ago, where Greta Thunberg was on the front page nearly every day on some paper. So are you a little bit worried that maybe we've just taken our eye off the ball?
I think we're not in the same position as we were before, because it really was never spoken about. There was, I know even for myself, like I really started getting involved when the strikes began. So like the level of people involved now is vastly different than before. And yeah, of course, like, we always want climate change to be the forefront of conversations, because it revolves around everything, like I said, like people and planet. And of course, it has major health implications as well, like, that has to be recognized. But I think at the moment in the pandemic that we're in, it's a very kind of, I suppose, a short-term problem that hopefully will lead to a vaccine at some point. And climate change, unfortunately, isn't going away that fast. And we don't have a vaccine or something that can that can fix it. It'll be a variety of solutions and innovation that will do that. So I think at the moment our concentration is on COVID, but like I said, there's amazing people like Tara and the youth group yesterday who launched the Manifesto, and everyone who's at that event who are really interested still.
Right, and
we'll
Tara,
take the momentum forward, I suppose.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love what Alicia is saying there, and I think that what's emerging from this too is that there's connections between climate change and COVID, so and injustice. So in the parts of the world and in the parts of our country where the air quality is poorest due to air pollution, and air pollution causes climate change, but also makes us sick. Those are also the places with the highest incidence of COVID and where people have suffered most. So this point that we're constantly making, that you can't separate the health of the environment from the health of us as human beings, is actually coming to the fore at the moment. And I think for me, there have always been periods of time where the policy boring people like me, we just chuck along in the background, even when the spotlight goes off climate and environment. But it always comes back, and then that boring, trudgy work that we're doing in the background is still really important. So that's always a message I have for people of Alicia's generation and younger too. It's not that we haven't done anything about climate over the last 20 years. We've done a lot of policy making and testing and seeing what works and what doesn't work. So it isn't all on the shoulders of the youth. There is something there to build on. That I hope can help her generation then scale up and move faster and with greater urgency than my generation has. But I do hope that we've done some of that groundwork that's there. And it tends to be invisible, and that's fine. But I think, it'll help us to scale up faster once we get this momentum and political will. And I think that's where my objectives and Alicia's and so many's are completely aligned. We just want to grow the conversation. We want more people in Ireland to talk about climate from whatever angle works for them, whether they care about it because of plastic pollution or their health or their kids' health or their job or what their kids should go to university and study. All of these things are connected to how we deal with the climate crisis. So people just have to find the right way in for them.
Right. Well, recently enough, Greta gave an interview to Time magazine, and she said that she felt that the level of knowledge and awareness about climate change is close to non-existent. Now, I think she's talking on a very grand scale there. She's talking about world leaders, really. And she does seem to be quite pessimistic still. I mean, you know, do you think that there is still hope there? I'm talking about on the grand scale now, where you're talking about massive world leaders, and you know, America unfortunately hasn't been a great role model, and there's several other large countries I think coming up behind them that, you know, we would have looked to in the past, you know, for leadership. Does that ever kind of drag you down, Tara?
Well, it's impossible not to be dragged down sometimes by the presidents of countries like the United States and Brazil and other places. But it's not through a lack of knowledge. They just choose not to use the knowledge that's there, or they choose not to have the right advisors. So leaders don't know everything. They can't know everything about everything that they govern. So they have to surround themselves with advisors that can help them to make the right policy decisions and can help them to have a broader understanding of all the pertinent issues. So it's a choosing not to know. It's a different issue for leaders than it is for everyday people, where I think there's a bit of confusion is often the problem. So sometimes a lack of information, but also a confusion around the information that's there. But a true leader acknowledges what they don't know and they ask for help. So, you know, my favorite thing is to contrast Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand with Donald Trump, for example. The one leads, her basic foundational principle for her government's leadership is kindness, versus Donald Trump, who's always trying to win and dominate. And so these are two completely different leadership styles. And I'm really interested in how we grow the leaders of tomorrow to lead through collaboration, to lead through empathy and kindness, and to lead with greater diversity and inclusion, so that there's more Tara, Siobhan's and Alicia's at the decision-making tables alongside the wonderful men that are making decisions. And so we get this greater blend of ideas and different perspectives that we need to lead into a very uncertain future. So yeah, a little bit more humility from leaders, and they can access all the information they need.
Well, it's just interesting you said that, because it hadn't dawned on me that this is three women talking here, and that the role model you chose was another woman. Do you think women are just a little bit more Mother Nature nurturing, that they tend to get involved in on the right side of this debate?
The Mother Nature nurturing, I don't know. So I'm part of a leadership program called Homeward Bound, which the tagline is Mother Nature needs her daughters. So Mother Nature definitely needs more women at the decision-making table. Women are scientifically proven to be more collaborative and more legacy-minded. So we think more in the long term, and we're more open to working together. So those traits alone brought into decision making are really, really strong. And above all, we just need diversity of every kind in decision making. Otherwise, we'll never get it right. It's like trying to make the hardest decisions with only half of your team. We need the whole team on board to make the hardest decisions. I don't know. What do you think, Alicia?
No, I think you're right. And it's funny because I suppose in the climate movement and definitely in the last year or two, it's all about like activism and the environment and like all these very harsh words. And Mother Nature sometimes, and like nature is kind of lost in that conversation. And I was in my old primary school recently before COVID, and I met the teacher who used to run the Green Schools Committee with us. And I was like a weirdo. I was involved from like when it began to when I left. And she was like, "Oh, do you remember our saying?" And I was like, "No, what are you on about?" Like, of course I don't remember it. She was like, we ran a competition anyway to get our slogan, and it was "Mother Earth cares for you and me. Without her, we cease to be." And since she said it, I've been thinking about it so much that like I was only like between 8 and 12. And, we kind of came up with that collaboratively, that, you know, we had that realization that without Mother Nature, our lives are, you know, maybe not cease to be, but are certainly drastically different if we don't react to climate change accordingly. And that's just stuck in my mind since the day she said it.
Keep it, that's gold.
Absolutely, you could adopt it for your youth climate change manifesto as well. I have been getting almost panic attacks about the amount of PPE that's being manufactured at the moment, which I know is a necessity, but it is plastic, the vast majority of it. Is there any way around that? Have either of you come across anything that we can do to limit it or replace it, or what the hell are we going to do in 2 or 3 years' time when all of this starts to show up in our oceans?
It's already on the side of the road. It's already on the beach. Yeah, I think so. The coronavirus is killed by soap and water. So that means there's no reason we can't have reusable things made from natural fibers too. A lot of the people I know wearing a lot of PPE, it's really hot, it's really uncomfortable because it's not breathable because it's plastic. And then there's so much of it because it's single use and disposable. So my call out there for anybody listening to us is I would like the health and safety profession and the medical profession to sit down with sustainability professionals and work out a long-term solution around PPE that's going to enhance the experience of the people wearing the PPE and also reduce the amount of waste. I think it's absolutely totally doable. There's no scientific or medical reason that we can't. Now, yes, in surgical theatres and in, you know, intensive care, it's a different thing. But sort of, you know, in the rest of the world, we do not need to be using this single-use plastic-based PPE. And what we can all do in our own, for ourselves, is make sure that the face mask or face covering we get is made from, you know, as long as it's 2 or 3 layers of cotton, they say that's fine, and you can wash that and reuse it, and we can model that behaviour. And I think there's great job opportunities too that I'm seeing springing up for companies, small companies and SMEs around Ireland, in making reusable gowns, reusable PPE that can be washed. So some of it is a mindset, but we also need that the guidance is clear, and that the health and safety guidance and sustainability guidance line up with each other.
Mm. And Alicia, how do you feel about that? I mean, there was a great move there before COVID, even in the schools, to cut down on plastic, you know, single-use bottles and other equipment. Have you found there's been good reaction to that?
Yeah, definitely. There was a huge shift, even in my own school, in trying to we brought in, like, you know, one of those water fountains, the really expensive ones, and people were moving away from the idea that, you know, we need to start thinking long term rather than short term. And I think that's the issue here, is that, you know, we're in a really unprecedented situation, and people are, you know, fighting to get the right knowledge, and it can be a lot of misinformation a lot of times, and it's obviously a scary time as well. And like, sometimes, unfortunately, sustainability and the environment can come second, and, you know, obviously people put their health first, and that's sometimes they're interlinked. A lot of the time they're interlinked, but I suppose people are rushing to make decisions. It's making the right information out there, and I'm glad Tara shared that piece, because I hope everyone listening would hear it, because it's hard to get that information and know, like, you know, which masks are more suitable depending on you know, if you're immunocompromised or you're over the age of 70 or whatever. But I think it is just the knowledge and the awareness of that those masks are just as good once you're washing, really.
And can I ask you now, both, for you, what would you like to see as the top 3 priorities if you could wave a magic wand and get 3 solutions to 3 current problems? Tara, I know you've written a book recently, kind of along those lines, you know, kind of I suppose a dummy's guide really to sustainability. What would you like to pick out as your top 3 things that you think are achievable?
Yeah, so if I start with the book's called How to Save Your Planet One Object at a Time, and it's about making sustainability for everybody, because it's all based around the most everyday objects that are in your house, your garden shed, bottom of your gym bag, wherever it might be. And the whole message there is try something, make a small change, and tell someone about it. So as Alicia has found out, one of the most powerful things we have as individuals is our voice. And the ripple effect of our voice is massive. So if Alicia makes a change from reading my book, and she tells her friend that this was good, and she tells her brother, and she tells her granny, and each one of them tells someone else, and they all practice this small change. We then grow many people making small changes into what is actually quite powerful in terms of its ultimate impact. So 2 things would be: 1, make a small change, and 2, use your voice. Tell people, bring it up in any conversation that you're having, because you're a more powerful messenger to your peers than I am to your peers, because they trust you, they know you, and they like you. And the third thing is, number 3 is one for governments, which is that we would not spend 1 penny, euro, or cent on our recovery that has not been checked against the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, to make sure that what we invest, this money that we're borrowing now in, is going to yield a great reward for Alicia and Alicia's children and their grandchildren in the future. So we have to invest every cent of that money really, really wisely. And we know how to do that. That's not an unknown. We know exactly how to do that. It's just about making the right choices. Hard choices, yes, but the right choices. Those are my 3 things.
And Alicia?
That's amazing, Tara, and I totally agree. I suppose from my perspective, they're similar. And I suppose listening to Mary Robinson yesterday and Selena Nourok, who's from the Marshall Islands, I definitely think that that supporting the most vulnerable in the transition, who here in Ireland would be people working in the Midlands and small farmers particularly, and supporting those people, because there's no conversation being had at the moment where they're involved in what's going to happen to them. And the pointing of the fingers doesn't work when people aren't even in the conversation to begin with. I just don't think it's ethical at all. And then the second thing, I suppose, is similarly to change the dialogue about climate action. And you don't need to be this like climate activist or like Greta Thunberg to make a change, whether it's like at home, like Tara was saying, that her book shows you how to make small little steps, or to help a friend to do something, or whether it's in your school or college or workplace, that those small little steps are where most things have developed from. And the third thing is really about young people, and it's about getting a Climate Youth Council up and running here in Ireland, so that young people can really direct their voice in a proper setting with a seat at the table. Because I think at this point that young people, we deserve to have that chance to echo how we feel about the situation, because we're the future, and we're coming up, and we're living in this world right now, and a lot of young people have great innovative ideas as well to share, and young professionals as well. So I think that's another key that I'd like to see happen.
Great. And Elise, can I just ask you, because you're one of the controversial, in quotes, Leaving Cert students this year, and I know you've been tweeting a lot about lack of communication and slowness in decision making. So I mean, how are you balancing all that stress and and your hopes and optimism for your career, along with climate change and all that? I mean, is it you must be a very organized lady to be able to balance everything this year in particular?
When you said controversial, I didn't know what was going to come after, to be honest. No, it has been tough. Like, it's been really tough for everyone. I suppose I'm really lucky because, Siobhan, like, I've been involved in a lot of things for the last few years. So I've been kind of balancing school and like stuff outside of school anyway, with different organizations. So I've kind of have learned to work from home as best as I could and can at an early age, where I know a lot of young people really struggled, which was tough to see, and I think it has been tough, and there's no denying that. I think a lot of Leaving Cert students have found it immensely tough, but I'm hopeful that this has given young people a bigger voice in these things.
Excellent. Well, listen, ladies, thanks very much for joining me today and this during Plastic Free July, and best of luck with the campaigns, both of you, and with the futures. Thank you. This week's music comes from Klaus Harvey. Klaus performs with a band called the Four Maldehydes in the Kinsale area, and has also performed at several arts festivals. In the past, he has opened for acts such as Tracy Chapman and Michelle Schacht, and recorded this song during lockdown for the Self-Isolation series by Porch Productions. It's called Alone in a Room, and the words are very appropriate for this week's podcast theme, so have a listen.
Living in hope, but I've given up waiting. The worst kind of outcome is the worth contemplating. Love is elusive like water, it slips through your hand. Become a recluse and let yourself loose on the land. Look out the window, surprise, it's not raining. Red streaks at sunrise, but I'm not complaining. Self-isolating makes us all go deeper inside. Extroverts climbing the walls, suitably terrified. I want to talk, but I need to take action. I want to sleep, but my thoughts are distracting. I didn't think it was love, oh, but what a surprise.
Thank you for listening to the Southern Star Coronavirus podcast. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our podcast, which is available now on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Acast, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Waiting if I can reach it. They say you can show it, but you cannot teach it. Sharpen my wits and my critical thinking. Floods of false stories and the cities are sinking. Oh my. All of our problems, according to Pascal, stem from the fact that we just cannot sit still, alone in a room, safe, nothing but our own soul. Trying to fill up the emptiness is an own goal.